All right, please be seated. No, I'm afraid to ask. How was lunch today? Good. All right, very good, very good. All right, Ms. Perez.
Afternoon, folks. When we left off, before you had your delicious lunch, we were talking about Detective Mayo. And just to review and recap, remember that
Detective... Turn that mic a little closer to you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Detective Mayo did not have Mr. Prelu's bedding taken by the CSI lab. Didn't have the CSI lab do McKenzie, Banks, or Batey's rooms. And there were no timestamps on any photos at all. Mac Prelu, who is Mr. Vandenburg's roommate, both have been on campus just a mere 3 weeks. Just a mere 3 weeks. That's what Mr. Prelu indicated, that he was Mr. Vandenburg's roommate on the second floor, and he and Mr. Vandenburg shared a room about 3 weeks when they arrived on campus. In one of the interviews, Mr. Thurman was present, and I think that's a very important interview. And why is that important? Because someone is telling the government, the prosecutor, the state in this case, what he heard and what he saw. How important is that? How important is that? And he says some very, very important things. He's given immunity. First of all, he's given use immunity. Use immunity. They're not going to prosecute him if he gets up here and tells the truth. Gives the interview. He never saw Brandon Vandenburg on his computer. He never heard Brandon Vandenburg's voice in there other than saying, "I can't get an erection." That's what he said. Told that to Mr. Thurman. But more importantly, he never said, Mr. Vandenburg said, how important is that? When I asked him, I said, did you ever say that? Were you asked? Yes, I never said that. That's his roommate. Who did he say was saying it? What witness has not been called here?
Please, they can call any witness they want to.
Right, that is correct.
Mr. Brandon Banks was identified by Mr. Mark Prelu as the one doing all the talking in that room.
Please, I don't think there's any testimony of that, Mr. Record.
Yes, there is. They can review it.
I think you're talking about Mr. Prelu, and he's at some point, I don't know which point it was, he had said that.
He was talking about the next day, not in the room.
Okay. Who was? Mr. Prelu?
Yes. He talked to Mr. Banks, and then the next day...
We checked the statement to get trying to get the jury.
Okay, gentlemen. All right. Let's move on, Ms. Perez.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Reagan. And why did he come in here and tell you something differently? Why did he get on the stand and say, oh, that's my roommate's voice? Because now they found his DNA on a towel, a green towel. If you look at the photos, who had a green towel wrapped around their waist? Who signed? The alleged victim did. She had a green towel wrapped around her waist. Well, that's a tongue twister. When I asked Mr. Prelu about that, He said, they called me in, I brought my 2 lawyers, I met with Mr. Thurman, and they told me we were going to test forensics. So he knew what was happening. He had no reason to protect Mr. Vandenburg. In fact, he gave 2 statements. We reviewed both of them. Both statements. One with Detective Mayo and one with Mr. Thurman. And he never said that was Mr. Vandenburg's voice. And I got to say something here before I even move on. Who would be best of all the state's witnesses that they called to identify Mr. Vandenburg's voice? His best friend, who drove him here to Vanderbilt University so he could play football from Palm Desert, California. He's known him since he's 13 years old, heard him when he was drunk. Mr. Vandenburg called him from that room. Mr. Quinzio said he was so drunk I didn't know what he was doing. He was my best friend. Now he's not. Do they ask him? Do they play that video? Mr. Quinzo had the video. That's where Detective Gish got it from. Did they ask him, Mr. Quinzo, I'm going to play this video. You know your best friend's voice. No. No. You've heard witnesses say it was Mr. Vandenberg's voice. Detective Gish, he said he heard the interview, the hour and 10-minute interview, and that's how he determined it was Mr. Vandenberg's voice. And that's your decision, folks. That's your decision. Look at the proof. Why did not Mr. Quinzio ask that? Why wasn't he asked that? Best person. Didn't understand his voice. So drunk. Beyond drunk. Mr. Prelue, his roommate, in 2 interviews, with Detective Mayo and Mr. Thurman at different times, doesn't say that. And the second interview, he says it was Mr. Banks. He says Mr. Banks was the one talking in the room. He saw the alleged victim in Mr. Vandenberg's bed, not on the floor, not left like a piece of trash. Mr. Vandenberg called for help. He called his mentor. They came to help him. They put her in bed. They covered her. Not left on the floor like a piece of trash, like the state has said. Mr. Vandenberg called for help. The other 3 boys were meeting on the 6th floor. They took different routes. They didn't care. They did not care. He cared. Dylan Vanderwall. Dylan Vanderwall is the one who has his hand around Mr. Vandenburg in the picture. Said he was intoxicated. Mr. Thurman and Mr. Reagan were going back and forth on that witness about what he knew and what he didn't know about different stories. And the end result was Mr. Vander Dillenwall said Brandon Vandenberg told him multiple different stories. He was confused. He was one of the persons that helped Mr. Vandenburg put the alleged victim into his bed under the covers. He told the detectives that Mr. Vandenburg was shocked of what happened. He was in the room with Mr. Boyd, Mr. Samuels, when Mr. Boyd called Mr. Batey from Mr. Vandenburg's phone. You saw that on video. It's not that I'm putting these facts up there because I'm pulling them out of the air. You saw that. You heard the testimony. Joseph Quinzio, California resident, just graduated working, was Mr. Vandenburg's best friend, played ball together. They flew him in from California to testify. Said that Mr. Vandenburg was speaking gibberish. Not my word, his word. Quinzio knew what was going on, but Vandenburg did not. Never heard him that far gone. Wasn't even speaking words. Very intoxicated. In voicemail, he was out of it. He wasn't a big alcohol drinker. They weren't friends anymore. Mr. Vandenburg asked Mr. Quinzio to send the videos back to him because he didn't remember sending them. Didn't remember sending them. The last one I've already covered. Jaborian McKenzie, co-defendant. The issue of credibility lies heavily with you regarding him, because he got on the stand and he was one of the people in the room. Other than Mac Prelude, he was one of the ones in the room. And he gave multiple interviews. And what's important about that is he always said, Mr. Vandenburg was not involved in this. He just met him 5 minutes before this, or less, 5 minutes. Didn't know him, didn't socialize with him, didn't drink with him, didn't do anything. Just met him. Used to see him on the football team practicing. He'd been there just 3 weeks. Why would he not say that dude did it all and protect his brothers? He said Mr. Banks and Mr. Batey were like brothers to me. But yet he gave those up, but not Mr. Vandenburg. That's where truth lies. That's where truth lies. When there's no interference, when you're just talking. He gets an email and response. A text. The white boy didn't do anything. There's no officer, there's no police, there's no nothing. He's just sending that out. How credible is that? Very credible. Very credible. Didn't know Brandon Vandenburg. Didn't know him. Mr. McKenzie said that he took pictures from other phones. Told Detective Mayo, and told you understand this, that Mr. Vandenburg was freaking out, That's a big word. Freaking out. Freaking out. I don't know how you can say so much more that Mr. Vandenburg wasn't involved in what they were doing. What's the storyline again? The storyline is, let's put Mr. Vandenburg on trial here. Why did he change the story? Why did he get up here all of a sudden and say Mr. Vandenburg was involved in this? He did it right after they told him, hey, bring your lawyers in. Fingerprints are on the condom box. Fingerprints are on the condom box. Now all of a sudden, and that's the first time, he said, oh, well, let me tell you what really happened this time. I'm going to be truthful. I'm going to come in and be truthful. Mr. Vandenburg, that's his voice. He did it. He encouraged. He was all this person doing all this. But he and his roommate, his brother, Mr. Banks, fingerprints were on the condom box. I better straighten this out. It's Mr. Vandenburg. Forget about all the times when I was just saying in a text message, the white boy didn't do anything. He was freaking out. Didn't know him. Wasn't involved. To now, he's doing it all. That's, folks, where you judge the credibility of somebody. That's what credibility is about. It's not because they get up here on the stand, they go, when I come to court, I'm telling the truth now. You look, you examine, you look at reasons for people to lie. And what's his reason to lie? He's looking to benefit from coming in here and pointing Mr. Vandenburg out. Why? Because he's looking for preference from the court and from the prosecution. That's what he's looking for. That's the unfortunate part of all this. If they would stick to their stories, white boy didn't do anything, he wasn't involved in this, for numerous interviews, we would not be here today. We discussed most of this. One thing I didn't discuss, that he told Detective Mayo that they ditched Brandon Vandenburg. What kind of word is ditched? They want to get away from him. They want to leave him alone. Let's move to Nurse Parnell. I think there's a issue with alcohol here, with drinking too much. Nurse Parnell talks about the amount of alcohol that the alleged victim told her, about how much she had to drink. But more importantly, the government has tried to blame Mr. Vandenburg, who was underage to buy a drink, that was buying her drinks. Why? Because it fits the storyline. It fits the storyline that Mr. Vandenburg is buying this girl drinks. She tells a nurse, who has just having a conversation, has a nurse, that a lady, Angie, was buying her drinks, buying her group drinks. That doesn't fit in their storyline. But the truth is in the evidence, ladies and gentlemen. The proof is in the evidence of what was going on here. She was drinking. Okay. But don't tell someone one thing, and then when it doesn't fit the storyline, get on the stand and say, oh, no, it was him. An underage person buying drinks. The alleged victim, you know, it takes a lot for her to come in here and testify. A lot. She was happy to see Mr. Vandenburg. They were both very intoxicated. The blackout episode, I mean, she blacked out before on 2 separate occasions. One in a taxi cab where she had to be woken up. One when she got home and had conversations with people and doesn't remember doing that. Why is that important? Because the storyline is blame him. Don't look at other things that happen. After this event, she leaves with her friend, gets in the black Mercedes, and goes home, and then goes to the pancake pantry with friends. Miss Miller indicated that there was a long line. They waited, and then they went to the pool and hung out. The next day, consensual sex with Mr. Vandenburg, and I think that was confirmed in Mr. Vandenburg's statement, as well as the DNA evidence about that. Other factors that I call just other factors you can consider or should consider, in my opinion, without looking at witnesses. Mr. McKenzie is the only one who's testified that Mr. Vandenburg passed a box of condoms around, but his fingerprints weren't on that box of condoms. His were, Mr. McKenzie's were, and Mr. Banks were. Mr. Prelue heard no discussions about condoms from Mr. Vandenburg when discussing that with Mr. Thurman. Do you think it'd be a time to be truthful when you're talking to the General District Attorney? It'd be time to be truthful. Tried to get help when he arrived at the dorm. He looked for an RA. He did not know the 3 guys, had no relationship with them. Met them that second he drove up there, and there was no RA. And the government is trying to tell you that he had a relationship and association with people he just met minutes before this event. Tried to push Mr. McKenzie and Mr. Batey out of the elevator. They laughed, they joked. Took to her apartment, tried to get in. The key wasn't working. They were very intoxicated. I know Miss Miller indicated that she didn't hear anything, was there. I don't even know if they were in the right apartment or not. I don't know. I would submit to you on that. But we know they were there, and they got her car. And he told you in his interview, Mr. Vandenburg told you in his interview, he should have just left her there instead of trying to help her. And then he runs into the 3 guys. Ms. Norman talked about intoxication, and she talked about awareness. He was aware of around him, aware of this, aware of that. And he went to the bathroom and came out and pulled his zipper up. He was aware of that. Well, if you look at the videos, the alleged victim went to the bathroom 5 times. Stopped at a drinking fountain. Got a drink. stopped at a friend's room, Jake Bernstein, read a note on the door. She had no memory of that. Was she aware? They want you to hold Mr. Vandenburg to a different standard, which you cannot do in a criminal proceeding. Maybe outside, but not in this courtroom, not in a court of law. How fair is that? How could they do that? How can they say Mr. Vandenburg is aware, doing all these things, but yet you have someone who says, I know nothing for 4 hours, but the video camera shows what she's doing? How do you know a drinking fountain's there? Your phone, your keys, your friend. Is that being aware? Should we hold a different standard for her because she's an alleged victim than Mr. Vandenburg? That's what they want you to do. That's not the law. That's not the law. If we were to go by that standard, we wouldn't be in this court of law. We wouldn't be in this country. Oh, it's going on the smaller screens? Okay.
Yeah, it goes on the small screen.
Let me see which one's up there. If you look at your screens, that's criminal responsibility. It's the second paragraph, and that's taken from the actual jury instruction you'll have back. It's much longer than that, but I wanted to focus on the second paragraph, which talks about if acting with the intent. The intent is the element that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt about Mr. Vandenburg's intoxication. They must show beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Vandenburg wasn't intoxicated and that he had intent. But you heard the evidence, you heard the witnesses, you see the videos. Intentionally means that a person acts intentionally. That's where the aware of, on the bottom it's underlined red, aware that the conduct, aware that the conduct. And that's the fairness, the awareness I was talking about. If you want to say Mr. Vandenburg was aware, then look at those videos when the alleged victims go into the bathroom, laughing, walking with her friend, drinking water, going to a friend's room. She was not aware. Hold them to the same standard. Hold them to the same standard. Mr. Vandenburg was intoxicated. going to put up intoxication, but I'll read it to you. Intoxication means disturbance of mental or physical capacity resulting from the introduction of any substance into the body. Intoxication is relevant to the issue of the essential element of the defendant's culpable mental state. We heard from Jaborian McKenzie, the state's own witness, who said Mr. Vandenburg was intoxicated. We heard from Mr. Mayo, Detective Mayo, when he interviewed Mr. Vandenburg, and he said he believed Mr. Vandenburg when he told the alleged victim that he was intoxicated. We heard from a California witness who flew out by the government, who told you he was inebriated, didn't know what was going on. Folks, he was intoxicated. He was intoxicated. The state's own witnesses say he was intoxicated. That is a defense. Again, it's sad that we're here. Videos are disturbing. They make you mad, make you upset. But as I showed you, Mr. Batey and Mr. Banks are the ones named in that. Mr. Vandenburg, they want to have you believe that he was part of it because of his conduct. They want to ignore intoxication. They want to ignore the awareness, hold you to a different standard. It's okay for our alleged victim to be unaware because she was intoxicated, but it's not okay for Mr. Vandenburg on the awareness issue because he was intoxicated. We're going to hold him to that. He cannot say he was not aware. Your decision on all the evidence that you heard. If you don't think I spoke the truth to you, the court reporter has the transcript. Review it. Mr. Thurman's going to get up here and tell you some things, point me out, said this. Just remember what I told you, please. Please. Thank you. Thank you. And please find Mr. Vandenburg not guilty. Thank you.
Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.